Hello. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the
Hello.
first. Oh yeah, hi Grace. I added you to the stream and didn't even say hi. Yeah, welcome everyone. This is the first Azure Developer CLI community call hosted on YouTube, Twitch, wherever you are in the world. I'm Savannah. I'm the product lead for the Azure Developer CLI, and I'm joined by Grace. How's it going, Grace?
Yeah, hi. My first community call, feeling maybe a little nervous, admittedly, but also excited.
Exciting. We have some really exciting stuff to share. I've got a bunch of folks teed up for demos. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I know that we can't see you, but you can see us. But this is pretty informal. Hi, Kai. Thanks for joining. But yeah, if you're not familiar with the Azure Developer CLI and someone sent this link to you and now you're watching and you're like, what's the Azure Developer CLI? It's an open source tool for getting your app that works on your machine all the way up to the Azure cloud, supporting your development journey end to end, local development, provisioning, deploying, monitoring your app, setting up CI/CD. So that's the context for this call. We just had our 0.5.0 beta 1 release a couple weeks back. And so we're highlighting some of the awesome stuff that went into this release. So I'm going to get started here. Kind of some spoilers. We've got a Codespaces demo. We're going to talk a bit about OpenID Connect, OIDC support, as well as our new MSI installer. We're also going to have some time for Q&A at the end. Hi, Nitya, Christian, David, thanks for joining. Yeah, so let's jump right in. So I figured we'd start with who's who here. So you'll see some of these folks on the call today. But if you're on GitHub, you might see them respond to GitHub issues or in discussions. And so we've got a smattering of folks across product, engineering, user research, and design, all working on the Azure Developer CLI. Yeah. All right. So talking a bit about breaking changes that happened in this release. So previously we relied on we had a couple dependencies. One of them was the Azure CLI. We're really working to kind of streamline that first, onboarding experience, getting started with Azd, trying to make it as simple as possible. And so we now have effectively no dependencies. We have one dependency on Git, which I think most people have already installed on their machine. And then if you're using GitHub Actions for CI/CD, we do require the GitHub CLI that we are sort of going to investigate whether we want to keep that dependency in the future. The other thing new in this release is we now accept a name as the first kind of argument to the azd env new command. So when you're creating a new environment, passing in that environment name. And that's like pretty much it. Nothing too scary happening, but wanted to make folks aware of that just in case they're interested. I guess the one last thing to mention there is just if you are using the Azure CLI, we still can use that for authentication but we don't require you to install it to get started. But yeah, that's pretty much it. We're going to just get straight into demos because I think that's the most exciting part. So I'm going to bring on Daniel. Hey, Daniel, to talk a bit about Codespaces.
Let's see. Hi, everybody. Welcome. And thanks, Savannah. Let's talk about Codespaces here. So Codespaces, if you're not familiar, is a containerized deployment of a development environment that you can access through your browser. So it looks like Visual Studio Code. It's running inside of your browser, but all of your resources are actually in the cloud, and you can do development and debugging, in one browser session, leave that browser session, come back, and continue your work. And we have a full-featured development environment that runs inside of your browser. So right now I'm on the awesome Azd website. This is a list of some projects that are Azd ready. And
hey, Daniel,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. Could you zoom and enhance like maybe one time?
Oh, of course. How's 175?
Ooh, wow. I don't know. I think it's pretty clear now. But if folks think it's a little too small, let us know. We can continue to zoom in.
Absolutely. Thanks, Savannah.
Cool.
So let's see. I just clicked on C#, and we will go into our C# with SQL here. I'll tab over. So the button to notice here is code. So we're inside of our template repo right now. I'm not going to create a fork yet. I don't need to. I'm just going to click on code and then go over to our Codespaces tab. And then I'm going to click that plus button. And that's going to launch our pre-configured container right away. So it's going to build the container, and that's going to take a few minutes. But we'll just skip to the part where that's already done. And as you can see here, we have a full IDE ready to go, Visual Studio code. And we also have the Azd tool installed. And we also have the Azd, let's see, what's that called? Extension installed as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and log in so that I can authenticate with my cloud. And we'll grab this, do our device login experience here. Should be a few clicks. Even in our demo subscriptions, we like to make sure that things are secure.
Two-factor, man.
There it is. Okay, so we're logged in. And now I can just go over and right-click on my application and hit provision. And what this is going to do is this is going to provision my resources for me. It's not going to deploy any of the code that we have here, but it's going to stand up the database and the other Azure resources that we would eventually deploy code to later. And that's going to allow me to do some local development, but inside the cloud. So if I click on that, that experience will start up and it'll start asking me questions. But we're going to skip ahead, of course, to the part where that's done. And you could see that it asked me a few questions. I answered those questions, and then it bootstrapped Bicep and deployed all of the infrastructure. So now let's go into a debugging scenario. So let's say I'm ready to run my application. I've got the code here. I want to set a breakpoint on line 20 in list controllers. And my application, of course, the resources are deployed, but the application is not. I'm going to go ahead and click on Debug API. I'm going to start that up. And this is going to launch the application once again inside this container running in the cloud. And it'll take a few moments to get everything going here.
And just while that's spinning up, like jumping back over to the terminal, just to highlight, like I know this wasn't called out as a demo, but we also released some great UX updates to the provisioning output, which you can also see here, which actually has progress and it's a little bit clearer. So just wanted to call that out as well.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. And the application is up and running. Now, this application is, of course, running on this container that's inside Codespaces, and it's up in the cloud. So we access it through a public URL that has authentication on it. So we can access this open port. I believe it was 3100 here. Just by clicking on this. And now it's going to connect us through. We need authentication in order to do that to the application as it's running. Now let's see if we can get that to be the right size. So this is our API application and it's running in our Codespaces. So I'm going to go ahead and try out lists real quick. We'll click on try it out and then click on execute. Now you'll see that this request is loading. And we got a red dot over here. And if I jump back, I'm still in this session and I'm debugging. We can do everything that we want to do while we're debugging with this in this scenario. And then if I click play, we can see that the session continues. The response comes back, and I can keep iterating. So that's Codespaces. Once again, we had no fork. We just started fresh with the code that we found in the repository. Everything is already installed in the container. It's ready to go. I only need to auth, provision, and then start my application and begin debugging.
That's pretty slick. I guess just in case folks missed it, you right-clicked on the Azure.yaml and saw all those Azd commands because the Azure Developer CLI extension is installed in the Codespace. But you could have also opened the command palette using Command or Control Shift P and typing Azure Developer and seeing all those same commands. So I just wanted to highlight that in case folks are unfamiliar with some of the shortcuts in VS Code or in Codespaces. But yeah, I was pretty excited to be able to ship this. And I know you worked on this feature, which is super exciting.
Yes, Wei and I worked on it.
Yes, awesome. Cool. Are there any questions about this, folks? Anything that you're wondering? You can type it in the chat, or we can also answer the question at the end as well. Cool. Well, Daniel, I think you're off the hook for now. We'll see you later because I think you're coming back.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Right. Thanks. Awesome. So next up, we have a demo slash feature conversation with Wallace from our team. So I don't know, Wallace, do you want this slide first, or do you want to just go straight?
Yeah, let's just keep this slide up for a moment. And thanks, Savannah. Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. So today we're going to do a little discussion about one of our new features. We have support for OpenID Connect using federated identity credentials inside of Azd now. And just for anybody not familiar with federated credentials, it basically removes the password generation or client secret requirements that you would previously have within Azd. So instead of having a service principal that was created with an auto-generated secret that, within your organization, you may have to set up a rotation policy and manage separately, but it could become a big hassle. So one of the things that we have now is federated identity, which basically creates a trust relationship between Azure and your pipeline provider, whether that is GitHub or Azure. Azure DevOps will support it in the future. Today we have support for GitHub. And what that allows you to do is, during your pipeline configuration on Azd, a trust relationship is created between Azure and GitHub. And when your pipeline is running in the cloud, there's a handshake that happens between the two, and we automatically are able to authorize Azd to communicate with your provisioned Azure resources and run your pipeline using the new Azd login features that we have. So I'm just going to transition quickly into a demo here, and I'll just show you that in action. So what you're seeing here on the screen is a run of pipeline config that I started just before the call today. And anybody not familiar with the pipeline config, it allows you to run your Azd workflow. That's the provisioning and deployment of your application within your workflow provider, given GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps pipelines. So today we're going to be focused on GitHub. So I just ran a Azd pipeline config command here, specifying provider GitHub. And one of the things you notice here is that it's automatically creating a service principal for us on Azure. And I've already authenticated with Azure prior to this demo here, so you're not going to see that flow. But it's automatically created the service principal. And the default configuration for GitHub today is that it's going to use this new federated identity feature. And so a couple of things that we'll call out here is after the service principal is created, it's actually creating two federated identity credentials for GitHub for two main subjects. Number one is the main branch for your project, as well as any pull requests that are created for your project. And so what that looks like is if we log into the Azure portal, which is right behind us here, and I go to that service principal or app registration, you'll see that in the certificates and secrets here, we have this tab called Federated Credentials, and we'll see those two credentials here for both main and pull requests. And so this allows that handshake to happen between GitHub and Azure, and allows no secrets need to be stored on your GitHub repo, and it's just the handshake happens and just makes it a lot simpler to manage your authentication between your identity provider. And just to kind of show that in action here is if I transition over to the GitHub action that just ran on my repo here, we can see it just finished just a little while ago. And one of the things we'll notice here is if we look in the summary here, we'll see that there is a login with Azure using federated credentials. And we'll see the call here, Azd login. It's using the federated credential provider flag, as well as passing in our tenant ID. And that's all that needs to happen. So no more secret passing between the two. and our provision completed successfully in this case. So pretty straightforward, just reduces that overhead or cognitive load on managing secrets within your GitHub projects, and just makes AZD even more easy to use. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Sweet. Yeah. So this is like extra security hardening. And then also, I don't know if you covered it, but there is like there's an auth flag, right? Like auth type flag that allows you to switch.
Correct. Yeah, there's an auth type flag. The default for GitHub is going to be the federated identity, but if you're not ready for that and you want to still use client credentials and manually handle your secrets and your secret rotation, you could pass that flag in to override that and go back to the standard client credential support.
Cool. And yeah, and we have like all of this documented also on our dev hub at aka.ms/azd, which you can, that's all of our docs. There's some how-to stuff there. There's installation instructions, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, if you want to learn more about that, you can either visit the docs. There's also a little bit more about OIDC support, not that one, in our blog. But yeah, cool.
It looks like we have one question if we have time for it, for you, Wallace.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Michael asked, if I create a new branch, I need to create a new Fed ID, correct? Is there anything in AZD to help me create new ones?
So you would only need to do this if you plan to run kind of long-lived GitHub actions against that branch. But if it's just a branch that you're developing, for example, as a pull request back into main, then you shouldn't have to do that, and the pull request one should work, should cover your particular case there. But if you wanted to have separate ones for like a dev branch and a main branch, then yes, you would need to create another subject in the federated credential. Today, AZD does not help you with that, but the easiest way to do it kind of after the fact would be to go into the Azure portal, and we can discuss with Savannah and the team to see about adding some additional features to make that even easier.
Yeah, good question. Any other questions before I let Wallace off the hook? All right. Well, if you have more questions for Wallace at the end, there will be a Q&A. Cool. All right. I think we're going to see a familiar face in a second here. I think that next up, yeah, it's our friend Daniel. He's back, y'all. We're talking about the MSI installer. Oh, I think, are you muted, Daniel?
How's that?
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay, great. Welcome back. Thanks, Savannah. We have made a small change to how we deploy our application in Windows. We are now using an MSI Windows installer file. We have published a signed MSI file for our 050 beta releases, and we'll continue doing that. You can get those out of our GitHub releases. If you have advanced installation scenarios, we support those. Those are documented. We default to a per user install, which means you don't require any elevation. You can just get started right away. If you want, we can, there are other parameters that you can provide to the MSI. Those are documented for those more advanced deployment scenarios. We also updated our PowerShell installer to use the MSI directly instead of unpacking the binary out of the zip onto your machine. A couple of things to note there are the version parameter supports the current release and future releases, and it doesn't support any of the pre-MSI releases. If you want to do that, we have some documentation on how you can go and grab those files manually and put them in the right places. One other thing, we did have a couple of issue reports that we found in the community where certain old installs of the AZD tool did not get properly upgraded with the MSI, and we're working on fixing that. So if you do have any problems today, go ahead and run the uninstall script first, and then just run the install script, and that will take care of your problems.
Cool. I think
that's it.
We do have a question in the chat. So we've got, since you now support MSI installer, we support when to get soon. Daniel, do you want to give that news?
Yeah, thanks, David. Indeed, we're working on onboarding to Winget and other package distribution tools as well. So yes, that is on our roadmap.
Yeah, we're
Look for it
actively
soon.
working on that. So stay tuned. Hopefully in the next couple of releases, we'll have some news on that one. Cool. All righty. Well, thanks, Daniel. I think you're officially like done presenting here, but we'll see you later.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Yeah. All righty. Finally, actually, I think we forgot about that. We didn't add this one to the demo list, but we have a pretty cool update to some of our templates, which is this new APIM, Azure API management support. And I'm going to bring on Alex, who's going to talk through some of that. Hey, Alex.
Hello. Hello, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here announcing that now you can use Azure API management with Azd. How cool is that? So Azd with APIM makes a lot of sense because all the Azd provided templates are built with APIs. In fact, Daniel just showed the backend APIs running with Codespaces. Basically, APIs are everywhere. In fact, according to Akamai, 83% of web traffic is API traffic. So it's pretty considerable. So in the spirit of our mission to provide a foundation with everything ready for you to build your own solutions, we have extended the existing templates with the option to enable API management. One of the benefits of using APIM is protection of your APIs. This is a hot topic at the moment because with the most recent development frameworks, the front end runs on the browser or in a mobile app, and the data comes from the backend through APIs. This means that APIs are not only exposed to the front end, but also to every sort of malicious actors. In fact, Gartner identifies APIs as one of the top attack vectors, so we should take this in consideration. When you enable API management with Azd, the API calls are mediated and secured with API management, and we will see that with a little demo. Having API management in the middle will lead to an indispensable API protection benefit, and another great benefit will be of observability. Okay, and then with the observability, with all the API call details are ingested in Azure Monitor so that you can have clear insights on API performance, availability, errors, etc. Now we made this really simple to use. After initializing your app with a template, you just need to set the use APIM environment variable. Then when doing Azd app, the Azure API management resource is created and configured with best practices, and the front-end UI will be configured to route requests to API management instead of calling the backend API directly. If you're already a running environment with your customizations, you can set the environment variable and do Azd up again. The deployment will be incremental and just API management will be added and configured. Pricing shouldn't be a concern since by default it uses the lightweight serverless tier that is only billed per execution. And of course, you can change to the pricing tier that is most appropriate to your scenario. All the templates are ready to be extensible with your code, and you can also extend API management with custom policies, monitoring, and so on. And you can also leverage the same API management instance with more APIs, not just the one provided with the template. Well, from here, let me do a little demo. I will share the screen. Okay.
Yeah, I'll swap over to you as soon as I see it pop up.
Okay, so you should, let me see if it works. This screen, yep.
All right, I'm gonna add it to the stream. There you go, you're up.
Okay, so here we are in the GitHub repo where you can see all the code from the templates and the documentation. And you can see here that we added this option to enable Azure API management. Here you have all the instructions available for you to set this up. It's pretty simple, as I said. You just need this command to set this environment variable. And then when you do the provisioning, a new Azure resource will be created that will sit in the middle of the architecture, as placed here with the API management. And with these errors, it means that the flow of requests will flow from the front end to the API management, and then API management will mediate and call the backend and respond back to the front end. And then all the monitoring will flow and it will be ingested to Azure Monitor. So it's not a big change in terms of the architecture. It's basically an add-on, a simple plugin. And after you do this, you want to see it work. You want to make sure that is working. One way to see it that it was deployed, you will see a new resource in the resource group called API management. Okay, that is basically the only resource that is added to the resource group, and then when you run the sample application, the to-do app, you may want to leverage these developer tools to see that the API that is being called from the front end is now through API management and not to the backend API directly. A simple way for you to have control on that. And another way for you to see this is when you see on the application map of App Insights, you have this flow of calls being called from the user interface to API management, then to the backend API, and finally, in this case, it uses the Cosmos DB. We see the Cosmos DB being invoked. So we have all end-to-end traceability into all the calls, and we can drill down and see the details in terms of performance, errors, etc. In fact, we can see like an end-to-end transaction details, see how much time it took in each phase. We can see details, like we can see details about the request, about the response, and that will be really helpful. You know, when we want to debug things, we want to see how things are going, and if there is like some performance error or performance issue to troubleshoot, we have an easy way to do this. Another cool aspect of it is that we configure API management, and here I'm in the API management service. We configure it automatically with a set of policies according to the best practices that we recommend to put it here. And we can see the best practices here, or the policies configured for different things, like to validate the content, do trace and put tracing information with custom fields, do a limit concurrency to limit the number of requests that you'll have for a certain amount of time, not to overload your backend. Then you can also do like validate headers and so on. So there is a lot of stuff already here. And then, of course, you can go here and do add policy and browse in this library of policies that are with the service and put more things that are suitable for your scenario. An important policy here is the mock response, and I think this is really interesting as well. Sometimes we are developing the front end and we don't have the backend API still implemented, so we can mock the backend API responses within API management, while the people doing the front end stuff will do their work and they will not wait for the people in the backend. Okay, so a lot of flexibility here, and yeah, it's part of the template, and it's really easy for you to extend. We are very excited about this, and hope that you do, and let us know about feedback and the ways that this could go forward. Over to you, Savannah.
Yeah, this was a great demo. I really like the kind of emphasis on really like observability or like tracing, as well as sort of like the collaboration stuff that you're mentioning kind of with mocking responses. I think that's a pretty relatable pain point that a lot of folks have. So that's awesome.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for demoing. Cool. So that kind of wraps our demos. couple last things wanted to share. So first off, as I mentioned, there's a bunch of links here. So if you want to learn more about this release, we have the release blog post, which kind of covers the demos and more. Also highlights some community contributions. And I think it also links out to the GitHub repo where you can see our release notes. Alternatively, you can also visit Azd Jan 2023 notes to see our release notes on GitHub for all of our 0.5.0 releases from beta 1 all the way through beta 3. And now I will hand it to Grace to talk through a couple last things.
Yeah, I'll be really quick compared to the demos, which were awesome. But first thing I just want to call out, like Savannah kind of mentioned with the templates, I think Alex also talked about this. We do have a template gallery at AKMS Awesome Azd. Again, with a dash in between, like the links that are on the screen right now. Oh, Awesome Azd is on the screen right now. Awesome. So on there, you can look at the templates that have already been contributed. Some of them are by our team. Some of them are by members of the community. As you can see, there are a bunch of ways that you can filter to see exactly what you're looking for. And even if you can't find exactly what you want, they're really made to be extensible and you can modify it for your specific needs. And you can also go up to the top, which I did not keep that in the screenshot, but you can look at ways to contribute. So you can contribute a new template if you have one. You can contribute a template idea if you maybe have an idea but don't know how to execute the actual creation of the template or just want somebody else to do it, I guess. And then you can also contribute Azd resources. So on our Awesome Azd GitHub repo, we have a README with a number of resources right now for like learning Azd or like creating like apps with Azd and just general things like that. So you can also contribute any resources you have that you think might be valuable for other people to see as well. Of course, all those things will be reviewed by our team before they're ever merged, but it's a good place to get started, and you can just open an issue with various issue templates that are on our GitHub.
Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, I think even some of the folks in the chat who were tuning in earlier, I'm not sure if they're still here, contributed some resources to the Awesome Azd README. So if you're authoring blog posts or videos, short, long, whatever, let us know. We'll add them to the README. Okay. What else do we got, Grace? We got this one.
Yeah, just calling for feedback. We are always welcoming folks to join user research opportunities and also just like give whatever thoughts they might have, which you're welcome to do that in the in the chat here. But if you want to sign up to be a part of our user research, you can visit this link, which is on the screen. So AKMS Azd user research sign up, and you can sign up to be part of our research.
All right. And then last but not least, it's Q&A time.
Yeah, so anybody, I don't think we have any questions in the chat right now, but feel free to chime in, ask any questions, or just give any like feedback you have on what you saw today.
I'll also, I'm going to stop screen sharing and bring our friends back on screen. Hi again, everyone. Oh, we have a question. All right. Grace, you want to?
Sure, yeah. So David asked, are you planning to support Azure Functions PowerShell runtime? This would unlock a lot of great IT pro event-driven automation scenarios.
Yeah. Do we have an issue in the backlog for that one? I don't know. I know we do support, I'm actually not that familiar with Azure Functions PowerShell runtime. Any of the engineers on the chat familiar with that post? No.
I have a little bit of.
Oh.
Sorry, am I muted still?
No. I think there's just a classic delay. It's all relatable, in this remote paradigm we all operate in.
So I'm not aware of any issues that we have open right now to support Azure Functions as the PowerShell, or sorry, Azure Functions with a PowerShell runtime. But we could definitely open up an issue and talk about it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that use case and kind of what folks, what kind of scenarios you're working through. So feel free to open an issue on our GitHub repo, and we can, or discussion even, and we can definitely chat about it.
I mean, one thing I will kind of call out is that we are working on an extensibility epic where we're looking for ways to build out support for new runtimes, new service hosts, etc. That the community could participate in that as well. So as we kind of continue on this extensibility epic, we'll keep you all up to date on what needs to happen, and then all of you can help add support for new languages, new service hosts, etc. And it'll be a good time.
Yeah, very much in the spirit of any developer, any app, any platform, all using AZD. So yeah, stay tuned. Oh, John in the chat said, looks like we need to add PowerShell as a language to deploy the files correctly. Cool. All right. Any other questions, folks? Otherwise, this might be the end of the first. Oh, we do have another Christian.
So Christian said, any plans you can share what additional core resources might be added, like APIM that was added in this release? So what other core resources might we add to AZD, if I'm understanding, Christian, your question correctly?
Like core support or like template support? From a template perspective, anything you can do in Bicep, you can do in AZD. And APIM, and Alex can speak more to this, was really a templatization, a large templatization like effort to get that in there.
I guess that an additional core resource that is impactful, it will be the AKS, and maybe the question from Christian is in that direction.
Yeah, Christian clarified core support. Yeah, so we do. We haven't formally announced this. If you're snooping, it's all open source. If you're looking around on our GitHub repo, you will have noticed that we are adding Azure Kubernetes service support pretty soon. Wallace is actually working on it, and so if you have thoughts about that and you're interested in AKS and you have needs that aren't going to be met by the proposal, would love to hear from you on our GitHub repo as well. James has a question.
Yeah, so James said, if I have an existing app that I'm deploying through Visual Studio today and some CI/CD, can I still use the Azure Dev CLI, or is it mostly new deployments, or do I retroactively add the template?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you can make any existing repository an AZD template. How you go about doing that, what your workflow looks like to do that, I think is sort of up to you. But like you could, in theory, like either AZD init into your existing project and you'll end up with some artifacts you probably don't need. Or you could, AZD init a template that looks similar to your architecture and then kind of copy paste your source code and kind of modify some of the IAC or the Azure.yaml if you wanted to do it that way. Some CI/CD. So yeah, either way, both brand new and kind of existing projects.
Yep. And is there a blog post that PC is working on for AZ devifying projects? Is that coming soon? Or
yeah, so she already has posted parts 1 and parts 2 of that, or part 1 and part 2, not plural. But I think those are linked on our Dev Hub as well. If they're not, I will try and get them added. I don't have the links in front of me, so either one of the folks in the chat from our team can probably paste it. Otherwise, I'll get it added to our quote unquote show notes, or comment them on the video after this is finished. But I think they are linked in our Dev Hub. If not those specific blog posts, there is an article about turning your project into an AZD template on our Dev Hub. Sweet. James is gonna look at the blogs. Cool. All right. Any last thoughts, feelings, questions? If not, this might be the end. All right. Going once, going twice. Okay, I think we're done here, folks. Thanks so much for joining. Again, you can find us on our GitHub, or a lot of us are also on Twitter, so you can feel free to yell at us there or say nice things, either way. But yeah, otherwise we'll see you next community call in about a month or so. All righty.
Great.
All right. Bye, friends. Talk to you later.